Hello everyone, welcome to the SouthField subdivision. SouthField is a fictional town on a fictional SouthField subdivision of the Chicago and Northwestern Railway. It is built in my basement and I figured I'd give you guys a walking tour of it. So let's go down to the trains. Don't mind me walking down the stairs. So this is the view as you descend into the basement itself. Basically what we are dealing with here is an overall basement size of approximately 29 feet along the long wall, and along the short wall approximately 23 feet. Visual dividers in between, so it looks like it's bigger than it is. If we come down this way, we've got a view that we can see from here. And the only way to access the inside of the layout is this duck under right here, which isn't the most convenient thing, but it does provide me with uninterrupted operation without having to have any kind of removable bridges, which I'm really not a big fan of. So we'll start the tour over here at Devil's Lake. This is a famous scene from a lot of my videos, with a lot of fresh scenery in it that's just recently been updated. What we have here is basically the main deck, which I call the main level here, is at approximately 45 inches at the railhead from the ground. And then as you see, once we get on the inside, I am working on a lower level that I will show here in a second. But this whole level is at about 45 inches. We've got basically SouthField Yard Office here. It's a scratch-built structure there. We've got an MOW building, a couple small industries. We've got the diesel shops along the diesel servicing facility. There is a lot more locomotives on the layout than that. I have quite a few, possibly too many, some might say. The depth of the layout from the wall to the fascia is about 30 to 36 inches, depending on where we are. So in an area like this, where from this point all the way to the corner of the wall, we're dealing with in excess of 4 feet. What I did in the corners is I created these access panels, which if I crawled underneath the layout, I would be able to basically just kind of pop out right there, which helped a lot with the building of the area around there, and obviously of doing the backdrop. Also provides a very, very nice view for operations, watching trains go by back there and just watching different operations from a completely different point of view than usually you would see from the position that I'm currently standing at. So as we head railway east, I'll try to move this camera without too much shaking. We've got some diesel storage tracks over there, some rip tracks. This is the main SouthField yard. It is 6 tracks wide. The longest track is about 26 feet long. That's the track all the way to the left, track number 6. Down here in the foreground, we have the caboose servicing facility and the caboose track, with only a handful of the cabooses that I have, because that's another one of my addictions. Down here in the background, we have one of the industries that we switch on this layout, SouthField Plastics Company. That one is obviously built from Pike stuff, but from my own mind. That is a fictional industry as well. Continuing railway east, we have an overpass for Route 1. Oh, by the way, SouthField is fictionally in Nebraska, so this is State Route 1, fictionally in Nebraska. Got another rip track over here. Up here on the hill in the northwest corner of the layout, we have Kenny Boiler Company, which is kind of like a prototypical, but also a lot of modeler's license taken on that particular industry. It's built off of an industry that is in St. Paul that was on cover of a calendar for the Chicago Northwestern Historical Society a number of years ago. And I just really liked the way that it looked with that hill. So I went to great lengths to duplicate the stone retaining walls and everything else, along with that Quonset hut, even though the building itself is obviously from a Walther's kit and doesn't look anything like what it does in real life, but it really captures the essence of it. And that corner also, as you can see by the separation point right there and right there, is a lift out panel. So it's got the same triangular hole in the back that I could get into, but I decided to fill this one with that industry. And I still have to work on how to actually get those cracks right there and right there filled in so that it looks more presentable than that. But for the time being, that's still a work in progress. Moving further railway east, we encounter the east ladder of Southfield Yard. This is US Route 30 overpass. It's again fictional. Continuing due east, we enter basically what is the modeled portion of downtown Southfield. So we have the ADM grain elevator, we have a diner, we have another rip track over here, of course more motive power. The majority of downtown Southfield is right here. It is also represented in an off the layout area that is further back from here technically, but is also fictional, I suppose, because just don't have the room to model the whole downtown for this particular location. We've got the depot that is currently obviously being used by the MOW crews. We are technically in the early 1980s, approximately 1984. So obviously there's no passenger service. So the depot has been renovated, modernized, and just kept in really good shape. And the MOW crews use it for usual purposes. We've got gotta have an ice cream shop. This industry in the background, this is Farley Candy Company. So Farley Candy Company is actually built on a prototype. And for anybody watching that might be familiar with the town of Skokie, Illinois, which is where I grew up, that building is still there. It's no longer Farley Candy Company. But when I was a kid, I would go over there and railfan the Tuesday and Thursday evening switch job. And those would be the cars that they would switch out. There'd be some tank cars from Cargill and air slide hoppers, specifically Golden West and Burlington Northern. So the factory portion of the building is clearly DPM with a lot of customization there. And the office portion of the building is completely scratch built to basically resemble the actual building as much as possible. That photo backdrop right there is a picture that I took back in the day of the exact location. And then I just built the road in here to match into that picture. So Farley Candy Company, Skokie, Illinois. Fictional industry right there. Not really sure what that's going to be yet. Just wanted to put it there and it looks good. So we've got the obligatory small town USA lumberyard and hardware store over here. This is a carryover industry from the original Southfield subdivision. Actually, I'm sorry, from the second version of it. So this is actually Southfield version 4. Southfield version 1 was a 4x8 layout many, many years ago. Southfield 2 was where this particular industry came from, with a lot of modifications to it. In fact, Farley also was a carryover industry from Southfield 2, except for a lot more modifications that were done to it for Southfield 4. So we've got an interlocking tower over here. And this track obviously goes to nowhere. Still have to work on that backdrop a little bit. But this area is known as Harris Mill Junction, Nebraska. Now, anybody who's ever seen the movie Silver Streak knows exactly where that name is coming from, because that's from that movie, and it's pretty much my #1 model railroading movie. I believe I might have seen it 500 to 600 times by now, because I just let it roll on repeat while I'm working on trains down here. So I decided to give this particular area that name. I think it serves it very well. and honors the movie that I've watched so many hundreds of times while working on the trains here. We've got an old abandoned track down here buried into the asphalt. Pretty happy with the way that came out. Harris Mill Junction, we've got a yard here as well. It is a 4-track yard, nowhere near as big as SouthField yard, but the purpose of this yard is basically to interchange cars and to serve the industries that are here. We've got the grain elevator, obviously, over here, which has 2 tracks, capable of carrying, storing 10 cars on there. Then we've got Farley Candy Company with the appropriate cars for it. And then we got an Eastman Company, the hardware store / lumber yard. And there's going to be another industry that will be right here in this pile of DPM parts. This is actually Evergreen Paper Company. That is a carryover from SouthField version 1. Some almost 25 or so years ago is when that industry was conceived. But that will have a spur coming off of that turnout right there, and we'll be serving the paper industry. Definitely looking forward to building that. Just not sure when exactly I'm going to do it. So, but this is a general view of Harris Mill Junction Yard. Definitely still a work in progress here. 4402 right here was the actual locomotive that would serve Farley Candy Company back when I used to rail fan over there. So obviously it's assigned over here because it is going to go ahead and serve that industry. Also building a caboose 10935, which is the one that used to run with 4402 back in the day. The track back there in the trees, and if you can't see it very well, that's the whole point, mission accomplished, is basically just kind of a hidden, I don't want to say staging track because it's only one track, but it's kind of a staging track. Right now I've got the business train parked on there. It was initially supposed to be, when I designed this layout, a descent track where I didn't want to build a helix, but I wanted to go down to a lower level for staging. So I was just basically going to bury that track at a slow grade down onto a lower level. And then eventually I decided to go ahead and build a helix. So that track was already there. So I just kind of ended it in the trees over there. It doesn't go anywhere, but it serves a very good job for right now for storing the business train. We've got some aliens moving in over there in the hill. So heading further railway east, what ends up happening here is, you notice so far we've got a 2-track main line. Right here, the 2-track main line basically splits. We've got the eastbound main going across Clayton River right there and heading back towards the beginning of the layout, so to say. And the westbound main crosses this little creek here, goes underneath this overpass, this timber overpass, and comes back around to an area that is still definitely a work in progress and back to where we started. So over here, what we have, if we approach it from this area, you can see this turnout over here, and it kind of disappears into some kind of something. Well, what that is the entrance to the helix. So if we drop down here, we can see that we have a helix that basically brings us down approximately 18 inches to what I call the lower level. And that is definitely still a work in progress. All it is right now is just a bunch of loose track with a bunch of staging on it. Nothing else going on there for now. Some structures that will eventually go somewhere, and a whole bunch of rolling stock. Then that is going to continue in this direction. And eventually it's going to follow around the whole layout. I'm going to obviously take that skirting down, shorten it, but for the time being, I just kind of stopped it here, using it more as a workbench than anything else. But that particular track up here goes down to the helix. And then this track up here comes out of the helix. So obviously we have a Y going on here with an auto reverser. This track chart may or may not be able to explain it. So this is where the tunnel was on the left side. This is where It goes underneath the little overpass on the right side, and then there's a Y down here inside the actual helix itself. Yeah, this might be a whole other video, but you can see a tortoise over there. That's where that switch is. So, and then this is a map of the lower level. None of those are wired up yet, but there's going to be 3 turnouts there as well that'll provide, eventually when this is all done, continuous operation in both directions on both levels, and obviously switching over between the upper level and the lower level. Still a little ways off on that one. More motive power. Nowhere near all the motive power that I have. Slight addiction to motive power. This right here, in the recent addition, this is a Pontiac dealership. This is actually Peter Epstein Pontiac. So anybody who knows anything about Pontiac knows that Peter Epstein Pontiac was also in Skokie, Illinois, and back in the 60s, it was the largest Pontiac dealer in the country. And I guess the owner or something like that was in good with the mob, so Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra apparently, were very tight with them. So because it was from Skokie and because the building is still there, even though it doesn't look anything like this, I figured I would like to model this here. This is obviously just a Walther's kit, but I do like the way the kit looks. And the original building, it will be very, very hard to duplicate. But yeah, Peter Epstein Pontiac. Got a couple of new Rapido Caprices that I'm going to convert to Pontiacs. And what else do we have here? Just a bunch of Trans Ams, because quite frankly, there's not many Pontiacs in HO scale. So continuing the railway east, we've got this trestle that I scratch built quite a few years ago, that at this point I'm not 100% sure if it's going to stay here or if it's going to go down to the lower level, because the lower level I'm thinking is going to be more of a like Black Hills division, Wyoming type of situation. So I believe that trestle might actually look better there, but we'll see. That's kind of a deciding block right now. Continuing railway east, we arrive back to basically where we started, which is where the staircase is. And this is where the eastbound main comes across the bridge at Clayton River. Now, Clayton River, just like everything else on this layout, as much as I can, we try to name after something that is important. So anybody who's ever seen Back to the Future knows about Clayton Ravine. Well, I don't have a ravine, but we have Clayton River. So that is basically the history behind that name. Got a propane facility here. And like I said, once again, we're back to the MOW building and the beginning of where the tour started. So a couple of closing points. The track on the layout is Pico code 83 with all Pico switches. There is one area where I started using microengineering, flex track and microengineering switches. That is the siding for the grain elevator and for Farley. This is code 70 turnouts and flex track. Microengineering is definitely a lot more complicated to work with, especially the flex track, than Pico, but it does have does look a bit more realistic, I think, especially for sidings and non-mainline trackage. So it has its advantages, but boy, is it a challenge to work with. I operate with an NCE Power Pro radio cab system. Very convenient, not having any wires tethered to it. It is situated down here on what I call the dispatcher's desk. I've got my programming track, computer interface for JMRI, and a whole slew of dispatcher paperwork here. Well, guys, thanks for watching the video. Let's watch some trains run.